Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the reality behind one of history's absolute most legendary and polarizing figures. I want you to imagine a man born in a remote tent on the Mongolian steppes. He wasn't a royal heir, he was just an ordinary nomad. Yet this is the very man who would go on to literally reshape the modern world. Consider this staggering number for a second. 20 million square kilometers. That is the size of the largest contiguous land empire in human history. To put that into perspective, his empire eventually stretched all the way across continents, completely and fundamentally altering the political map of the globe forever. So the really fascinating question we're analyzing today is this. How on earth did an abandoned, destitute orphan named Temujin rise up to conquer such a massive, vast territory? How does a child, totally cast out by his own people, transform into Genghis Khan, arguably the most formidable conqueror the world has ever seen? Section 1, a harsh and bitter childhood. Born out on the harsh Mongolian steppes around 1162, Temujin's early life was, well, it was a brutal struggle for survival. The tragedy really kicked off when he was just 9 years old. Rival Tatars assassinated his father, who was a minor chieftain, by using poison. And because the tribe absolutely refused to follow a child, they just completely abandoned Temujin, his mother, and his siblings. It gets worse, actually. He was even captured and enslaved by a rival clan as a teenager, before finally executing a daring escape. Stripped of literally everything, his family lived in absolute destitution. We're talking about surviving by foraging for wild roots and fishing in the rivers. It was a daily, grueling battle just to stay alive. But, this extreme hardship is exactly what forged his unbreakable willpower and his incredibly razor-sharp strategic mind. Section 2. Uniting the Mongol tribes. So after escaping slavery, Temujin had this huge realization. If he wanted to survive, he had to completely revolutionize how Mongol society functioned. Traditional society back then dictated that loyalty and leadership were based entirely on aristocratic bloodlines. But Temujin, he threw that whole playbook out the window. He started promoting leaders purely based on their personal merit, their combat skills, and their direct loyalty to him. Under him, ability officially trumped ancestry. And man, did this fierce meritocracy work. It made his growing army incredibly effective. After 2 decades of systematically defeating and uniting all these rival tribes, a massive assembly of Mongol leaders convened in 1206. In this assembly, which is known as a Kurultai, they officially declared him the supreme leader. He was crowned Genghis Khan, which literally means the universal ruler. Section 3. Secrets of Military Genius. Now, what made his armies so absolutely unstoppable across Asia and Europe was actually a brilliantly simple organization. He structured his highly mobile cavalry using a strict base 10 decimal system. So the army was broken down into squads of 10, companies of 100, battalions of 1,000, and these massive divisions of 10,000. This setup allowed for incredible battlefield discipline and seamless command over huge, sweeping forces. Combined with this structure were some incredibly innovative and, frankly, ruthless tactics. He utilized deep espionage networks to gather crucial intelligence long before a battle even started, and relied on these lightning-fast cavalry attacks. But crucially, he was an absolute master of psychological warfare. He'd offer a really stark choice: surrender and be treated with leniency, or resist and face utter annihilation. His reputation became so terrifying that major, wealthy cities would often surrender before a single Mongol sword was even swung. Section 4. Visionary of the Empire. But here's the thing. Genghis Khan wasn't just a military commander. His administrative genius is what truly held this massive territory together. You see, you can't just conquer a space that large. You actually have to rule it. So he instituted a universal law code called the Yasa. This was enacted to maintain strict order and discipline across dozens of distinct, conquered cultures, effectively unifying a vastly diverse population under one absolute set of rules. And his domestic policies were surprisingly progressive for the era. He enforced absolute religious tolerance, allowing Buddhists, Muslims, and Christians to practice freely, which drastically reduced internal rebellion. He secured and revived the famous Silk Road, fostering a huge explosion of global trade. Plus, he promoted a unified Mongolian writing system and established the Yam, which was an incredibly efficient relay postal network, allowing rapid communication from one end of his massive empire to the other. Section 5. The Final Mystery and the Legacy. Genghis Khan's incredible, dramatic life finally ended in 1227 during a military campaign, but his demise is just as mysterious as his life was. The exact cause of his death remains heavily debated by historians today. Whether it was a battle wound or a sudden illness is entirely unknown. And on top of that, per his own strict final orders, he was buried in a completely unmarked, secret grave. To this very day, the final resting place of the man who conquered the world has never been discovered. So, when we look back, his historical footprint presents a really stark paradox. On one hand, he was undeniably a brutal conqueror. His campaigns were responsible for the deaths of millions of people. Yet simultaneously, he's recognized as a visionary state builder who united isolated tribes, changed the entire trajectory of world history, and launched an unprecedented era of globalized trade. But perhaps his most mind-blowing legacy is actually biological. According to recent scientific studies, millions of men alive today, particularly across Central Asia, are believed to be his direct genetic descendants. It leaves us with a truly astonishing thought to end on. How did one impoverished, abandoned boy, surviving on roots out in the steppe, fundamentally reshape not just the borders of empires, but the very DNA of the human race?